Hey everyone, welcome to Itoday Apéro, the very first Itoday Apéro actually. I'm Steph, I'm gonna be your host, and thank you so much for joining. This is really exciting. It's also part of the Google chapter design sprint meetups, and yeah, it's a very first time we're organizing this meetup, and I'm super excited to see all of you guys. You can just cheer, woohoo! Yeah, we are seeing you. So hey everyone, thank you so much for showing up. This is really cool. And actually, we're gonna have a really good time. Um, as you know, we are in Europe in the middle of the second wave of COVID, and we had to postpone Itoday masterclasses to next summer. And thank you so much, our great, amazing speakers, Jake Knapp, Alex Osterwalder, Yves Pinger, also the sponsors and the Swiss Tech to have accepted to postpone the event, and all of you guys. It's gonna be really great. We have really good, I would say, hopes that it's gonna work in person the way we want, because now we have good vaccines, hopefully 94%. It's gonna be sunny next summer, and it's gonna be in quite some months. So yeah. Meanwhile, we decided to keep that community, together and excited, and we had so much of good feedback and good vibe from the last event from the summer that we just wanted to keep that community together, and we decided to organize Itoday Apéro. So an apéro, if you don't know, in Switzerland or in France, it's kind of a time to drink. So my glass is empty now, but it's not gonna be after that. So make yourself comfortable. Just get a good glass of wine. If you don't drink wine, it doesn't matter, but just take a good glass. We eat some cheese, and it's really time for chatting with friends. And we're gonna chat about innovation today. We also want to feature people from the community. So in our next events, if you are willing to be a speaker yourself, please feel free to apply to be a speaker, and I'm going to be super happy to host you in one of the next Itoday Apéro. Talking about speaker, today I'm super excited to welcome the amazing Ryan Rumsey live from Austin, Texas. And this is really exciting to have you with us, Ryan. He's the author of this book, I don't know if you see it, Business Thinking for Designers, that was published by InVision a couple of weeks ago. He's also one of the world's best thought leader about design in general, of course, about innovation. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Second Wave Dive, and this has nothing to do with the second wave of COVID. That's the name of his company. Yeah, he's an expert of leading innovation and big design teams. He led innovation and transformation teams at companies like Apple, Electronic Arts, USAA, and also Nestle. Because maybe you don't know why I jinxed it just before, but some of you don't know that he used to live in Switzerland, and that's why he's with us today. Thank you so much for being with us, Ryan. Please, everyone, give a big round of applause for Mr. Ryan Rumsey.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to see you all. Like I mentioned before, so many dear friends that I haven't seen in a while. I'm glad to see that you're healthy and safe. And gosh, I wish I could be there in person. We miss the mountains a lot. So I thought we would kind of bounce around today. I'd like to be, I do better when it's like just community and we chat with each other, just as if we were in person at a real apéro. And so I thought I would start by just sort of framing some of the conversation, some of the topics. And, my work in my career has kind of been to talk about some elephants in the room. If you're not familiar with the English phrase, what are the things that aren't often talked about that are usually should be talked about, right? And so today I want to talk about, I'm going to start sharing my screen just so we have something to share here. I'm going to bounce around too because I have lots of different things, but I'm going to start sharing because I want to talk about this sort of elephant in the room when it comes to design sprints. So design sprints, these wonderful methods and process that we've learned that don't necessarily resolve getting permission to sprint, if you will, getting the buy-in from our leadership to actually go do these things and create some change. So let's talk about the sprint to sprint. Before I do that, hey, I'm just Ryan. That's me. As Steph mentioned, here's some of my past experiences. Mostly I've been involved for like the last 10 years of introducing new organizational change inside of organizations, really all these transformation type of things. And so my job was to transform these organizations into the empowered product team models in support of the growth and innovation that they were seeking. As mentioned, this was my book. Steph, it was actually published way back in April, but COVID was happening. So like,
That's true. I actually
who's going to read a book at that time, right?
But
it's
it was
free.
relaunched.
Yeah, it's free. Go download it. It comes in Audible too. So as mentioned, I am the founder of Second Wave Dive. What I help people do is think about the next wave of their career. So we do training, coaching, and develop communities, but it's all about the next wave of your self and the next wave of leadership. All the things that you didn't know you needed to know to feel successful, valued, trusted, and confident while meeting the expectations of the companies that they have of you. And we get to work with some rad other companies too. Anyway, let's get into it. So I want to briefly talk about the current state of affairs. Let's baseline. Let's do a little bit of a history lesson, right? So for the last 10 years, design has kind of been all the rage. We told everybody there was this third leg to the stool, this Venn diagram, and it worked. They bought it. They totally took it into consideration. They were like, yeah, right. And so now we see all these tools, methods, and reports that are mainstay, including design sprints, a big, big part of our everyday. And we have all these reports that say design-led innovation in companies are beating the S&P 500. We're providing more value to the market. And we have all these wonderful rad case studies from companies that inspire us every day that we can learn from. And now there are executives, design executives, and innovation executives. These are all commonplace. 10 years ago, this isn't the case. We did it, y'all. Like, let's celebrate. Let's have a good time, right? But yes, and right. So perhaps making it is a little bit different than what we have visually pictured. It wasn't quite what we thought it would be. I noticed the poker table. Many business leaders are still struggling to sort of understand the value of all this stuff. What does this mean? I mean, we have it in place, but really, what is the value of it? And I think as a result of that, many teams are still struggling with the realities of everyday organizational change and innovation. So as a result, a lot of investment in this type of work is still questioned. And when that work is questioned, we have a lot of false starts, a lot of frustrations, a lot of confusion, a lot of turnover, a lot of like, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, rinse and repeat, right? So for the next, 35-ish minutes, give or take, let's talk about some elephants in the room, excuse me. So from a McKinsey report earlier this year, what we found striking is that some 90% of companies weren't reaching the full potential. And I know I'm mentioning design, but this is really about innovation. Even in the past 5 years, as they've doubled the number of senior people doing this work. That's striking. Double the number of people doing the work. Only 10% of people think that they're getting the value or potential out of that. This is not the language of business decisions, my friends. We love Post-its, and this is not how business decisions are made. Nor are our prototypes and sketches. When you're selling design sprints as a solution, executives actually want the answers to these questions. What do I get? How much do I get? When do I get it? How much will it cost me?
Oh, yes.
They want to know those before they fully commit to incorporating this work. And executives won't sponsor this type of design sprint work unless they're seeing the math, unless they actually understand how that equates to some viability stuff. Okay. So what do we kind of need to know about these things? Well, first and fundamentally, when companies hire us, either as employees or as consultants, our job is to help them create a competitive advantage, right? We need innovation so desirable, they create adopted competitive advantages for organizations. So I think we need to retire this Venn diagram because it doesn't quite speak the truth. Just having these things does not give you innovation. What the companies actually expect of us is innovations to gain a competitive advantage. And so we should really talk about feasibility, desirability, and viability within the sprint. And if we look at the high level of what a business model is and what a business strategy is, a business model is simply how a company intends to create, deliver, and capture a value. A strategy is just how they do it different than somebody else. So, my friends, again, when we look at sprints are got business strategy covered. What they aren't answering right now is how to capture value. Really, what I'm talking about is the money factor, the viability factor. Because the goal of a business model is how to figure out how a company sustains itself, how it is actually soluble. If it's a for-profit company, it's how to make money. The strategy goal is just to create a competitive advantage. So again, sprints do this wonderful thing on the strategy, but our colleagues are going, what does it mean? How do we capture value out of this, right? I'm going to skip a couple of these questions because they kind of get, we don't need to go to. But companies have specific strategies to win. That is what sprints answer for us. But you've been hired to make that strategy a reality. They want to know how that's going to capture value for us. Here's another thing. Innovation is directly related to the model and strategy in place. So I think a lot of the times when we talk about design sprints and creating innovations, not every innovation is the same. Let's just take a look at Dell and Apple, right? Dell has a very different strategy than Apple. Dell's model is to provide direct-to-consumer products at affordable prices. Apple's is to provide direct-to-consumer products at premium prices. Dell's strategy is to do that through top-notch supply chain and logistics. Apple's is to do it through integrated systems, high-quality buying experiences, and innovative design. Does Dell need the same innovations as Apple to be successful? No. So I think a lot of this is talking about another big elephant in the room is like, we don't actually have to develop the same types of innovations as these companies that we love in these rad case studies, right? Because at the end of the day, the executive leaders at a company like Dell know that they win, they remain and create value through superior supply chain, right? By the way, math matters, my friends. When somebody asks the ROI, they're really asking these 4 questions, right? And ROI is a measurement measurement used to gauge the efficiency or effectiveness of a project investment. It's not a measure of you as a person. It's not a measure of your worth as a person. So I think we just have to understand the basics of those types of things. Also, decisions are made easier for your colleagues, for executive friends, when they understand your rationale. They want to understand, right? They are suffering from decision fatigue, and they want to understand that taking them down a garden path of what might be doesn't help relieve that fatigue. Your partners need to know why you decided to tell the story in a particular way so they can understand their rationale, your rationale and argument. This is all about the numbers, my friend. And what narrative storytelling, this garden path sort of thing that we end up producing at the end of a sprint, it inspires everybody, but it completely misses the reasoning of why this is going to be important. And the assumption I think that we have is this. This comes from B.J. Fogg, a well-known behavior change academic. The assumption is that if we give people the right information, it will change their attitude, which in turn will change their behavior. So the big elephant in the room here is that value means different things to different people. And I think one of the things that we do a lot with sprints is talk about perceived value, terms like excellence or simple or easy to use, factors that are actually difficult to calculate. And when you're pitching that to an executive, what they're looking at is, what is this going to look like on the balance sheet? If I have to invest in 12 people taking 5 days, which is actually not really the case. If I have to invest in 12 people taking multiple weeks to do this design sprint activity, that's multiple weeks that they're not going to be working on other things. Can you show me the math of why I should make that decision? And by the way, we know this. MBA skills don't directly translate to showing that value. We need a combination of things because showing value is a systems problem to solve. It's not just about a design sprint here or a financial sheet here. We actually need to merge these things together. And I think remixing is the key. Weird Al Yankovicing. Let's take the things that are already working and actually just smash them together. What happens if we actually just combine them together? What might that look like? So I'm going to show you a way that we've done this, that I've done this in my past, right? So let's talk about setting the stage. At a previous organization that I worked at, there were literally hundreds of product managers who were being skilled up at the same time in design sprints, safe agile, and digital capabilities all at once. And they were being asked to create all these new product visions that aligned with organizational OKRs. Now, if you've ever been around an organization that is trying to skill up a workforce all at once, they can't possibly learn all these things at once. And so the opportunity for my team was to help them create just good enough product vision, create good enough product visions, which could inspire and align cross-functional partners. And so how did I sort of lead my team in doing this? Well, I didn't tell them what to do. Instead, I gave them a request for a proposal. This is my own team. And I said, you tell me, how are we going to solve this problem? I'm going to give you a request for proposal, and I'm going to facilitate a workshop where we can converge on our own ideas and concepts into creating some type of new structure, new format to help all of our partners in product management. And I gave them a big, hairy, audacious goal. How could we impact 50 different product visions in one calendar year? So rather than just doing heavy service design and journey map types of things that we might be able to do 3 or 4, how might we actually generate in one calendar year 50 product visions really around innovation? So I facilitated a workshop for us where we were going to develop our new value proposition and vision and working agreements as a team. That allowed us to capture our own strengths and gaps when it came to our own skills and the types of activities that we did. That allowed us to identify how we might look across our partners and our organizations and find willing cross-team partners to actually try some of this new stuff out with us, and allowed us to create some type of working agreement where we had clear expectations of what we as a team were going to provide and what we weren't going to provide to the rest of the organization. And we created a value proposition statement for us to sell out to our executives. What we came up with was a novel approach to management consulting. So I ran an internal team that was a management consulting team to colleagues and peers. And what we looked to do was address the gaps between business design and digital strategy to actually help teams create some new innovation. We had to prioritize the senior leaders across P&L functions who were really interested in what they were going to get, how much will it cost them, all these types of things. And initially, our own measurement was just to see if this was working, was just around utilization. Were people going to knock on our door and ask to work with us, and to see how that would happen? And so what we did was built a prototype program complete with activities and targeted test pilots within 1 week. We actually used the design sprint process to develop a prototype program to then design sprint with other people, right?
Yes.
What we did was we modified a full 5-day design sprint into a 2-day design sprint. And it was focused on developing visions that combined not only human-centered design and practices and prototyping and all these things, but also business strategy, so that we actually had a balanced view. They went out and produced not only these sketches on day one, but we actually looked at some napkin math and how the viability of each one of these favorite sketches might play out. So this was quick sales funnel type napkin math that we would quickly identify the ROI. And after a year, we didn't hit our goal of 50, but we did hit a goal of about, I think it was just under 30. We helped approximately 30 different teams develop new innovative ways that they could either affect their existing business model or propose new business models. And our initial target of utilization went from, it increased by 400%. We helped teams produce hundreds of new capabilities across the organization. But more importantly, we helped leaders know that the investment in these small types of experiments that are actually cheap to run over the long haul were a worthwhile investment. So I'm going to bounce out here because what I want to do is maybe get some questions first before we jump in.
Great. So, wait, I'm just stopping your screen. Yeah. I just have a first question. Did you see a difference of culture between Switzerland, where you worked, and the US in this regard?
Yes and no. I think Switzerland has a genuine appetite to innovate. Whereas in the US, I think it's a lot of words are kind of said. Mm-hmm. Where I think they're both very much in common is the appetite for risk in Switzerland is relatively low. But the appetite for risk in a large, this was a financial institution that I worked at with over 30,000 employees. The appetite for risk at an executive level tends to be low, right? If things aren't too broken, let's kind of keep going. So I think really the similarities there is around the appetite to really do and try new things is relatively low, which is why we had to even reduce the risk of a 5-day sprint down to 2 days, because the initial reaction was 5 days. That's so much. I can't take people off their work for 5 days, let alone 12 people, so.
We've heard that a lot too, and there is the workshop part that is short, and then you have the full prototype and testing part that is longer, but yeah. Maybe do you have some questions from the crowd?
So what other ways of de-risking the innovation process maybe you could share, Ryan, other than maybe reducing the sprint? And
so one of the ways is to actually invite non-typical design sprint people into the room. So we would bring people who were like business strategists or business analysts who were really good and quick at doing napkin math, at looking at something like a sales funnel and saying, oh, according to our OKRs, we're targeting this segment. They already had these numbers in their head. This is the approximate number of people in this segment who we are targeting. We need to then hit 10% of that segment in order to achieve our goals, to then look at a prototype and ask a real question, not how might we, but can we? And ask that flip side. And this is where the business analyst would be a wonderful sort of say like, well, we have to hit 10%. And then that was a way for us to have quick conversations of like, well, does this prototype need to reduce errors? Does it need to improve time on task? Does it need to do something else in order to sort of equate to that napkin math? That was one of the ways. The second and probably more important way, Adrian, is to find sidekicks. And that's actually to look at the power dynamics inside of an organization. So we've got a shared mural board. I don't know if everybody's in there yet, but what sidekicks are, let me just pull up another little slide that I can share. So this is a just a version of a stakeholder map that I use. And so forgive me, I just quickly kind of threw this up. This is my little stakeholder map, right? But what I look at inside of an organization is who has power and influence, but then who is willing to experiment. And so what I ask are two questions. Do the people who want to work with us or are looking to create some type of innovation or change, trying to do really something different, do they need help, and do they know they need help? Because if they know they need help, they're probably at a point where they've tried as much as they know, and it hasn't really helped them. They're kind of feel stuck. And so we look for these people down here in sidekicks to essentially say, if this doesn't work, if this quick experiment or this design sprint doesn't work, it's not going to impact the business overall. So what we want to do is actually prototype running design sprints or running a new process with people to see if they work. If they work, we would then build internal case studies based on the results that these teams got to help get them unstuck. Oops. And those are the internal case studies that we would then pitch to, say, the more influential, the more powerful, and essentially say, hey, this random team over here got 50% improvement. In fact, I think I have an example here of this sort of case study. I do. Let me just share a different screen. So, here's an example of what that case study might look like, right? This blank team has handled 2.2 billion in a year on assets, but they faced a 10% customer loss. We helped them with a vision sprint to essentially see how they could innovate. And as a result, they were able to improve proceeds paid by 50%, improve all these types of things. So we would use those case studies to then ship out to the more influential, the more powerful, the people who were less willing to take on risk as a first-time colleague, more willing to take on risk when they saw that the method was proven out and already working.
Great. I think Remy, you have a question, right?
Yep, I do. But okay. Whoops, sorry. Can you hear me well? It's fine?
I can, yes, fine.
Well, thank you so much for your generosity and time. My question here, it's much more practical. It's just that according to my own experience, when we tend to intervene with C-level people or things like this, when we will tend to think that these people have a clear vision of the metrics and definition of success and common set goals, it seems like it's not that obvious most of the time, and access to metrics and data in order to take good decision is not that easy. I was wondering if you had any tips in order to access the right data and to align people on a common goal and definition of success.
Well, I do. So let's talk about math a little more. I'm going to pull up a separate deck. Hold on one sec. Duck. Let's talk about math. Okay, so just going to share a different deck, because I think when we talk a lot about metrics and assumptions, business assumptions, right, around all these things, I think a lot of times our leaders will say something like, we need to retain more users. And we go out and we run away and we Google how to retain users, right, to our heart's content. But our first job before we do that is to actually ask about the math that they're already using. Essentially, it's to challenge the business assumption with math assumptions. So, and I suggest doing this from a very curious and humble, right, standpoint, but essentially saying like, hey, right, when people talk about ROI, there's actual math equations involved there. So a lot of times they'll say, like, we need to retain more users. Hold on one sec. There we go. I want to make sure that my sharing is working okay. We need to retain more users. So I think the first question we should ask is, awesome, we love to retain users. What's our current retention rate? Because if they don't have an answer, they're not using math and they're just guessing, right? And there is no way to calculate the return on investment on a guess. So what we can do is say, oh gosh, you know, it's really going to be a struggle for us, because for us, everything aligns to your math. If we don't know what your current retention rate is and how you're going to target and fruit your improvement, all of our experiments are based on that number. And we're really afraid that we might do something that screws it up accidentally. And that's a risk, you know, that I don't think either of us want to take. So it's this way to sort of like get there and just ask a little bit about the math and see if it's actually being used, because otherwise it's a setup, right? And you know, one of the ways that I'll stop sharing for now so I can see. One of the ways that I've talked about it in the past is like, you know, you and me, we don't want to show up in front of the CFO in 6 months. And the CFO is wondering why our balance sheet is all screwed up because we decided to move a button. Goodness, that looks bad. That's a risk neither of us want to take, right? And so it's this kind of sowing some doubt, but also asking for an invitation, right? It's inviting people to say, like, let's get serious about our metrics.
Yeah, obviously, it's what we do as well these days, but it's so hard to have like a metric culture implemented yet, but it's coming little by little.
Because,
thank you for your answer.
Yeah. The realities of metrics, right, are first baseline, then benchmark, then set, right? And if you're doing that for the first time, if you don't actually have those, that's like a 6-month process. We won't actually know any targets for 6 months. And that is like to go through that 6-month gauntlet of fear, right? That's really, really hard. So what we try to do is make those as like micro as we can. Let's just start with one metric, see how that goes. And if it doesn't go well, you know, we'll keep, you know, no big deal. And I think that's one of the underlying things is it's so overwhelming. We see these great books or you know, talks from friends at like Netflix who have like metrics galore, or right, or at Apple. You know, when I joined Apple, we were using standard deviations of metrics, not just the metrics themselves. That's such an inspiring thing, and it's so overwhelming. Like, you have to do these very basic things to even get to a point where those things start to come in. And that is maybe something that the executive has not done in the past, and maybe something that they don't want to like let everybody know that they haven't been doing that in the past, right? It's really hard.
Ryan, I'm having a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a way to measure the cost of opportunity of not doing something?
Oh, sure. Not doing something is the status quo.
Yes.
Right? Not doing something is, so let's just go over here again. So when I talk about remixing, right? Let's just do some SWOT analysis on the status quo, right? So when presenting recommendations or options, and you have or are working with a team that doesn't really want to change, one of the recommendations that I always put up forward is like, here's the SWOT of not changing. Here's the strengths and opportunities of not actually going and doing anything different. And by highlighting that, we could say like, look, we've been trying this thing for 3 years and nothing has happened. We can choose to continue to do the same thing, and we should expect the exact same results. So, you know, it's also a challenge. And I think for us as innovators, it also gives a little bit of window into, is this a place that's going to work for me as an employee. I don't want to keep, beating the same drum. And if I put forward some type of analysis that says I'm confident in this analysis that doing the same thing, doing the status quo, will result in the same results, maybe this is not going to work for me, and maybe it's an opportunity to go work with a new partner or look for something else.
Cool. Who has a question for Ryan? Or maybe a story of pushback when you were trying to sell a design project from senior leadership.
I have a question. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Sabrina.
Nice to meet you. Where do I get the right data? So sometimes it's not really clear, what will be the outcome of a sprint. So you have different kinds of stakeholder there. Where do you find the right data?
So I'm going to rephrase it in a different way. Right depends. Right is contextual. Right always changes. There is no one piece of data. So what I do if I'm consulting, before I start the engagement, what I ask them to do is just grab every bit of data they already have. And mostly what I ask them to do is start with two teams, your sales team, your customer support team. Those organizations typically are the most mature in tracking things like sales, top of funnel stuff, or tracking the costs of support. When you get into support organizations, and this is where I've spent a lot of my background, they measure things like time on task, first call resolution, average handle time, and they calculate, well, a phone call costs 12 times as much as a text message. So you can quickly do some napkin math and say, can you tell me, or if you're working with like a partner on the business side, as an engagement on the client side, and go, can you go to your customer support team and ask them just what these baseline measures are for the last 3 months? Because what we want to evaluate is see if there's any correlation. We know it's not causation. We know it's not going to be a direct link. There's all these other factors. But if we do a design sprint, the question I would then ask is, what happened to those key customer support or sales metrics 60 days after the sprint? Then you can build up a case study to then go to your next client and say, here's what we did. You can have this too. And so it's the same case when I talked about those internal case studies of, even if you're working in-house, is to go just find whatever data it is. I think a lot of times when organizations use things like NPS or CSAT, our initial like academic brain sort of says like, those aren't really showing the value, right? And we get frustrated with the metric. And instead what I say, it's just a tool, right? The only way to validate that something isn't working is to then show that there's no correlation, right? So that's how I do it when I engage with clients, is to say, grab any types of metrics that you have. Do you have MAU? Do you have DAU? Do you have NPS? Do you have CSAT? Do you have average handle time? Do you have any of these things? And if nobody has metrics, then I just talk about the risks that we're going to see. It's like, I'm happy to charge you for a design sprint, but if we don't baseline any of these things, you're probably not going to get the opportunity to do it again. And my thoughts are that you don't want to just do it once. You want to continue to do it again and again.
Thanks. So I think also that maybe if you don't have, let's say, kind of data with customers, you always can relate to data regarding the time a team spend for, let's say, a certain amount of hours to
That's right.
get to
That's right.
to an output.
You know, and I think a lot of business leaders want to know like the napkin math. You could take an average salary of the people attending and what 5 days might cost the company, you know, of not doing work. Sorry to interrupt you. You were going to continue. Okay.
I think that's perfect. So I think we need that, right, Steph?
Sure.
Yeah, of course. Also, I think in my experience, there is also the, how to say, there is also the fact that at the end of the sprint, a lot of the value is that it unlocked something that would have never went anywhere. You know, like they would have never started that project or never done it because they were too afraid of risking things. And I think it's also part of the value is that the projects are moving forward versus being killed or not being done. So yeah, how do you measure that value? Just the project are moving.
Is that a question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like this is why I really see the value of the sprint is that projects are happening after.
Oh yeah. So that's the case of like when initially just starting. The data point we used for my team was just utilization. Do more people want to work with us? Right. And then we, as an internal consulting team, gave out our own surveys for satisfaction. Right. And we would then work track how people would then do it. So check in with them. We had a regular cadence of checking in after 30, 60, 90 days. Tell me what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it was also anecdotal. You know, of working with somebody where they say, you know, my business leaders trust me more. And I would then have to ask again, that's wonderful. How do you know that they trust you more? Mm-hmm. And so there was other anecdotal evidence where they'd say, you know, when I talk, they're no longer looking at their computers or their phones.
Yeah, because you're becoming someone
right.
in the company.
You know, prior to me doing this work, nobody asked me to do research up front. I now get asked 3 times a week to do research up front. Yeah. Prior to me doing this, my boss never really asked me what I want my future job to be. Now my boss is currently working with me right? Prior to me doing this, my team never really talked about doing this. Now they're asking me every day, how can we do this more? So there's the hard metrics of trying to go find that sort of correlation. But then there's all the sort of qualitative stuff, and you can package that up as case studies. And it's pretty powerful when you have somebody say, nobody's opening their laptop while I talk. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think because you are becoming someone in the company and you have been working directly as a human being, you know, with your boss, your leader in one team, and you break all these silos. And that's where I see a lot of value. Probably, maybe it's hard to quantify, but it's how many people will have quit their companies if they couldn't work that way versus the people you can attract or retain in your company if you work that way. And I don't know how to quantify that, but I see.
So I know how to quantify it. It's just a long process. Sure. I can, this is like what I teach in my communities. So I teach a different version of OKRs, which actually, let me see if I could find it real quick. Go ahead and fill up the space with some chatter, but go ahead.
So about chatter, I think we're gonna stop in like 5 minutes and we're gonna meet on Remo. So it's the same like Itoday Summit. You can just click on the link. If you have Google Chrome, you can join us, and it's gonna be like free. You can move from table to table and have really good time with chatting and take a good glass of wine. Yeah.
All right. So I found it. Yeah, I found it. I'm going to open it up. So what I help organizations build and create are these big, huge maps of right? If you're talking about design or really desirability, how do you translate something like reduce login failure over to increase CSAT? How do you increase engagement by 4%? How does that translate to lifetime value by 3%? So what I help organizations do is build out these full maps of OKRs, all these types of things, and then I help them
Ryan, sorry,
communicate.
can you just repeat what OKR is? Because I'm sure in Switzerland a lot of people don't know. I know it's common in the US.
OKRs are the same as KPIs, if you know KPIs. So OKRs are objectives and key results. Think of them as high level objectives or outcomes that an organization wants and how they're going to measure them with key results. KPIs, key performance indicators, metrics, these types of things. So a lot of times what organizations might be able to do is sort of translate at a high level, right? The business wants to increase revenue by 2 million, right? Or acquire 100,000 users, these types of things. And what OKRs allow us to do is cascade that down to an individual team that says, we're just going to be on time, on budget. So what I help people do is build out these full scorecards of connecting innovation or desirability objectives and key results, something like usability or accessibility or whatnot, how that actually translates into business key results.
Who is the typical person you are talking to in a company?
So people who train with me are usually design leads through design executives. We haven't been taught this, right? But when I go and work with companies, it's typically a CEO or the C-suite team, like the founding team, who may have gotten to a certain point. Now they're trying to scale, and what worked for them to get to that initial point is not going to help them get to 10x of that point. Now suddenly they have to be mature with measurement, and they have to make very different trade-off decisions, and they don't know what they don't know. And they hear designers talking about, things like usability, and they can't actually see how that translates to more sales. So I help them walk through and sort of show them the realities of one being able to do this, but then the realities of it's going to take a little time to do this, right?
Great. One last question for Ryan.
Hey, I have one.
Yeah.
Ryan, I want to go back to something you said about you have to decide if this organization is for you. It's related to that. By the way, it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, my question to you is, having done this for so long, what are the signals that you observe that tell you that you have to grit it out, or it's time to pack it in? It's not going to happen in this organization or for this group, because it's emotionally exhausting work. How do you get smart about this, but not always second guess yourself?
So I actually gave a TEDx talk in Lausanne. Hey, Serge, about this, which is what we're talking about is like my own individual values and what drives me as a person. And so I've had to, this is nerdy, but I developed my own rubric and rating system to essentially do quick napkin math of like where my desire is and how many times I've actually tried to fix a situation. So if I think something is very valuable to me, but I've not tried to fix it, well, it must not mean that much. But something, if I've really got desire to, have this and I've tried a lot to fix it and it's not happening, that's when I kind of look internally and go like, maybe this is not a match. Right. And so I go through this exercise maybe quarterly to sort of, and that's because you're talking really a combination of like things that I need as an individual, which is like, can I be home by dinner? Do I have to work 80 hours a week or can I just work my 40 hours a week? Right. All these things combined with, am I motivated by the work? Do I see the morale of the people around me raising or, or going down? Like making that kind of call is a decision between both those things. And so this little exercise that I do is like, how do I combine all those subjective factors? How do I try to make them, more objective? So I could share a link to this nerdy process, but it's not an easy thing, right?
It isn't. It isn't. That is why it's I wanted to know. Thank you.
Sure.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, Ryan. So Ryan's gonna be available for the apéro, so you can jump on his table if you want to talk about all his nerdy recipes and how to track value. He has a book. So wait, let me show it again. Okay, I'm just putting the code because it's an iPad. It's an ebook. So it's called Business Thinking for Designers. It was published by InVision. You can find it online. It's amazing. It's free, right?
Free. Yeah.
Really, really, really interesting. A lot of great recipes. And Ryan, where can we find you online?
So easy. You could find me at ryanrumsey.com. That's just kind of where I do some general writing, but also secondwavedive.com. And Second Wave Dive is where we do these 6-week intensive courses where, I call it business thinking, but it's really about behavior change in humans. And actually knowing very pragmatic ways to develop your soft skills and street smarts. And so you can find information about that at Second Wave Dive. And we already have one Lausanne resident who will be joining us in January. And we've had a few others as well. Hello, Juro.
I've heard a lot of great things about you,
There's Paul,
about your course. When's the next one?
Next one starts January 25th.
Okay.
And in fact, let me grab, I have a coupon code for everybody who joined. Let me grab that real quick and we can give you a little bit of a discount.
This is amazing. So meanwhile, amazing. So please, everyone, please give a big round of applause for Mr. Ryan Rumsey. That was amazing, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
This is great. So everyone, if you want to keep chatting with Ryan, you're welcome to join us on the Remo room. You just need to go with the Chrome browser and have a webcam. That's all you need. And yeah, we meet on the other side. And I hope you liked that very first Itoday Apéro. That was rather experimental, but I think it worked. And we were live on LinkedIn, so this is really amazing. And see you very, very soon for the next Apéro. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And see you with a great, with a glass of wine on the other side. Cheers.
Bon nuit. Bon nuit.
Okay, thank you, Steph. Thank you, Ryan.